Hello and welcome into our Corn-Fed Sports in the Morning here for July 31st. It's our last July show. Football fan day is just around the corner. Fall camp starts up next week. So just kind of summing ourselves up on all the off-season headlines, Big Ten Media Day, moving into fall camp. So we got a football-heavy show today. Starting last week with Big Ten Media Day. So let's just jump right into number one of our Corn-Fed 5 here.
Yeah. Big Ten Media Days, and we're in Chicago last Wednesday and Thursday. Had the whole lineup from Jim Delaney to the coaches, and then each team brought 2 to 3 players on the Nebraska side of things. So, Pat, who impressed you the most from the guys that made the trip from Nebraska?
I think the one guy that jumped out at me, and it's not just because of what he said, or obviously everybody, you got to take everything with a grain of salt at this point, and that everything is just hype. It's just what people think going into the preseason. But the way that Quincy Enunwa handled himself, the way he was outspoken about everything at the offense, the way that he didn't want to back away from everything, he addressed something, he just approached everything with an open mind, and kind of seemed to let it be known that they know this is on their shoulders, that they know they've got to do better, that they know that the difference between what happened in the Big Ten championship game last year and this year is what they're doing. So just everything he did was about accountability. You see it this summer with he's doing his jumps out of the boxes that I think 48 inches high, and just blowing people away with his workouts in the summer and those little things. And I just think seeing him take that work ethic of his athleticism in the weight room and just all the things he does in the offseason and bring it to Big Ten Media Days like he did with that attitude, with that kind of mindset of I'm one of the leaders, I'm one of the guys that people are going to have to look to for support, for encouragement, just for all those little things along the process. I mean, you got a lot of guys. Kenny Bell's outspoken as a wide receiver, but you got a lot of guys who haven't spent a lot of time in front of the camera, who haven't spent a lot of time on field, and so just finding their way. And there's a lot of talent there. There's a lot of guys who can make plays, but just having a guy like Quincy on the top who can not only stretch the field but can be a leader, can be encouraging for all the other guys, all the tight ends, the running backs, all those other skill guys. I think he showed that he can take on that leadership role and he can make a big impact on the team coming this fall.
Absolutely.
But we'll move over to defense and another guy, another team leader, staying with leadership for number 2 here. Ciante Evans was also one of the guys who went to the Big Ten Media Days and represented the defense as a leader there, but he's going to have to show up on the field as well, maybe more so than anybody else, that he's going to have to be one of the big guys that Nebraska leans on. So, right. I mean, what do you expect to see from Ciante as one of the leaders of the defense this year?
Yeah, I think definitely he's going to be a leader on the defensive side of the ball. If you look at last year's stats, he had 56 total tackles with 38 unassisted and then 18 assisted tackles, and he also had an interception, pick 6 return against Idaho State, if you guys remember that. And I think he's not going to be a guy that gets a lot of huge numbers because of the position he plays. He plays, if you guys know, nickelback, which guys like Eric Hagg and previous Juwan Gomes, they've played that position. And ultimately, the position he plays is going to be he's going to be the most important player on the defensive side of the ball this year. And I think, maybe not the biggest numbers, but I definitely think Ciante will be the leader on the defense.
And those guys that you mentioned,
right?
Hagg, Gomes have shown that you can be the quarterback of this defense from that middle spot. Guys that can add read in the NFL level have shown that you think that middle linebackers, you think defensive line, those guys who set the tone in the middle of the field. Ciante can be that kind of guy who sets the tone in the middle of the field. So it'll be interesting to see how he kind of progresses and see how he's able to actually lead the defense come fall.
Yeah, going to switching sides from defense to offense now. You were talking about earlier when you're talking about Quincy, we have on the offensive side, Nebraska has a ton of talent, whether it's Jamal or Amir, Taylor, whoever. Saying that, what is the bread and butter of Tim Beck's offense, in your opinion, going into this season?
I think when you have those many weapons that people are going to game plan, you have that much of an attack that people are going to try and take away from you, whether it's the option game, whether it's the quick passing game, whether it's the up-tempo, that the guys who slip between the cracks, the subs, the third and fourth wide receivers, the 2 tight end sets, that those guys, if they can make plays in this offense, you saw it last year at Tariq Allen, his season high was 1 catch in a game, and that was a touchdown catch against Northwestern in a big game. And so you see those guys who can come on tight ends over the years. It's been the most obscure tight end who catches that bootleg touchdown pass, who does some of those little things. So just seeing those guys, the Jordan Westerkamps, the Alonzo Moores, those guys who have been waiting in the background, who all they want to do is get out there and contribute. And we already know about the physicality in the blocking game. We already know that they can make plays there, and that wide receivers at Nebraska have that reputation. But I think you're going to start to see over the next couple of years with the talent, with some of the athleticism of the younger guys, it's not just going to be about blocking. It's not just going to be about that. The wide receivers all the way through, number 1 through 5, are going to be important for how Nebraska is able to run their offense, of how they're able to find a rhythm, of how they're able to take advantage of those third downs, of theirs, when they're moving the ball, when subs are coming on and off, when Jamal's got to take a breather, when Kenny's got to come out for a second. When you have those kind of guys who can make plays at all different levels, I think that's going to be the bread and butter of the offense, is the guys who people don't plan for, is the depth, is the guys who Nebraska needs to take advantage of the matchups that other teams give them. So it's all about matchups. It's all about taking what the defense gives you. the defense is going to try and take away Kenny. They're going to try and take away Taylor. They're going to try and take away Amir and some of those options. So it's just going to the bread and butter is going to be Nebraska's ability to function against other, against the second tier, against those guys who are coming in. So it's going to be depth on depth, and I think when Nebraska gets those matchups, they're going to be able to exploit it, and the defensive depth of other teams in the Big Ten does not match Nebraska's offensive depth.
And you said 1 through 5 on wide receivers. It might come to season start 1 through 10 because there's a lot of guys,
a lot of talent. All right, we'll move to defense with our fourth one. We're bouncing back and forth.
Yeah, moving back and forth. Back to defense, in the last 5 years, Nebraska defense, kind of been heavily penalized. But Bo Pelini's been criticized for having his defense, makes mistakes, penalized. Going into this next season, you have a lot of young guys on the defense. There's some new rules with targeting of defensive players, on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. What do you think? How is the defense going to react this year to penalties and all that?
I think that a lot of the reasons you're seeing that is, and especially with the switch from Big 12 to Big 10 and trying to find personnel, and it's been personnel issues when you got guys who maybe aren't as athletically suited to play a position or who maybe don't fit into the system as well, and you're trying to move things around. You have so many moving pieces that you forget that this is still kind of a transition. The depth of Bo's. I mean, he's been around for a while now, but for the last couple of years with some of those things, he was working with getting his recruits in there and getting some of his guys through. So I think they're young this year, but they have the athleticism, they have the physicality, they have that that raw energy to them, and I think that's going to really help them. That they're going to be in better positions. I mean, you're still worried with the young defense flying around, especially at targeting. I mean, you've seen how much people have talked about experienced defenders focusing on targeting and focusing on not making some of those penalties. So it's going to be a mental battle for everyone. You see it at the NFL level where they talk about how tough it makes it to play defense, but I think every defense deals with those kind of struggles. And so for Nebraska, it's just going to be about really honing in and putting yourself in a good position and knowing the plays and knowing the scheme and some of those different things, because I think that's why Nebraska has found themselves in that position, is having one body too many, having to make up for physical things. And I think you got speed, you got young energy, you got size on the defensive line, so you're not going to see as many of those marginal things where players need to maybe do one of those things to get an advantage. You got a lot of athleticism, you got a lot of talent out there, and so just being able to turn that into energy and being able to turn that into a flow, I think will help them from the choppiness of penalties and from the broken plays and some of those things.
Yeah, and I think you look back at Big Ten Media Days, Bo Pelini was quoted on saying that this year's defense will be simple. It'll be simplified, simple to stupid, Make those younger guys play and don't have to think about as many things. Just go and make a play. But moving on.
I'm glad you brought up Bo, because we'll get back to some more Bo in number 5 here. Bo taking over the ESPN world.
Moving on to number 5. If you guys haven't seen on Twitter today, if you guys want to go look at maybe at Lefty Seamus, it's one of my bosses. He tweeted out the full schedule today, or at Keith Mann, Nebraska. He's the media relations director at Nebraska. They all tweeted out the schedules today of Bo on ESPN. He's taken over. He's on this show and that show and this show.
I think the big thing from Bo is just he was calm. He was relaxed, and it was just nice to see him go out there smiling. He's joking with Stephen A. and right away with Woody and some of the different things they're doing.
Right.
And so I think it was just funny to see him. My favorite part was just seeing him look at the TV screen as Stephen A. is, and obviously that's where the monitors are, and he's just in his zone. He's just kind of surviving at that point. But it was really interesting to see him accept the criticisms of his sideline antics and not worry about it and talk about how he needs to represent the university and how he holds his players to a high standard. And then his talks about Taylor Martinez, they tried to peg him on what he thinks Taylor's exactly going to run in the 40, and he went to the 4.3 range. And you could even hear skips in the background, really. Like, you really think that. And then Bo says, he's been in the NFL for how many years, and he thinks Taylor's going to be an NFL quarterback. And you hear that, Skip doesn't even want to let it go to break. He wanted to antagonize Bo about saying Taylor's going to be in the NFL. So it was nice to see Bo kind of slip in a couple of those things, just directly defy Skip Bayless's knowledge right to his face and some of those different things. And so it's going to be fun to see him. And he's got the Scott Van Pelt on the radio show and some of those different things. He's going to be on SportsCenter. He's going to be going through that. So it'll be interesting. I mean, this year has been a huge year for the football team, for Bo, for perceptions, for all those different things. And so
just the last 6 months, really.
Yeah, and so building off, the Husker Harlem Shake and some of those different things where he had fun and people saw that lighter side, I think more things along this line that just give this same image and give off this same aura of Bo is going to be huge, and it's going to make a big impact in recruiting and perception and just all sorts of different things. So Bo is continuing the magic on, and it's just nice to see him do it on the national level with ESPN. They brought him in before Urban Meyer on First Take and some of those different things. So seeing Bo move to the top there is just a really nice thing.
Right.
All right, well, that wraps up our Corn-Fed 5 for this morning. Like I said, Friday we'll have some clips from Fan Day. We'll have some of our first interviews for Corn Fed Sports this morning, but next week we'll have a full lineup Monday, Wednesday, Friday for our show. So thanks for joining us for Corn Fed Sports. I'm Pat Radigan.
Gage Peak.